You know, I keep hearing, like, we keep talking about women's rights, and women's rights, you know. And I've heard many people try to draw a distinction between what are rights in terms of, like, the American system where women hold rights, and they have achieved rights, and they, whatever, they carry these rights. But then I hear that there's a difference, really, between what Oklahoma people and Oklahoma women really are in possession of, which is, they're not really in possession, but they're burdened with responsibility, right? So I want to ask you, do you think that there's a difference between responsibility and rights, or is it the same thing that we're talking about?
Am I taking this question? So, what's real interesting in the separation of is that you know, in a matrilineal society, right from the get-go in our own creation story, in our Genesis, it began with a woman, not a man, and so our own evolution in our own humanity begins with a woman, and there's a mitochondrial DNA that sets the stage for that, and there's a matrilineity and a matrifocal understanding of the Haudenosaunee world. And so even nature backs it up. And so our whole epochs in time talks about how women are part of the story. It's not a white male-centered victory story. And I think that's the difference between a Haudenosaunee world view versus an American world view where they celebrate dead white men, you know, and where the whole focus is on the victor versus a collective, cooperative kind of society. And everything should always go back to the mother, I believe, because she has her finger on the pulse of the people. And she's the first to recognize when there's an illness in the family or where there's impending danger. So inside our society, we have the right of nomination, we have the right of recall, we have the right to call for war, to call for peace. And because, you know, women were understood to, you know, hold that kind of intuitive knowing, I believe that there is a big difference where it's understood in the Haudenosaunee world that women have so much to bear and so much to give versus a society that cries to be heard and to be seen. So that's why I say we're the law. I don't know if you ladies want to add anything to that.
I know, I have a mic issue. I keep trying it. So there we go.
I'll just have to hold this. Yeah, well, I think, you know, there's something interesting also in the way that you presented the question. When I think about, you know, you said a burden of responsibility. And so I never really understood it to be a burden. And I sort of actually almost find the burden to be kind of also like the Christian viewpoint on women. And I'm also like really grateful for Sally and all of the ways in which she has illustrated the difference between the Christian worldview, which you saw, you know, somewhat highlighted in the film, to the worldview of Haudenosaunee women. And the distinction between the two starts right at creation. And so for me, when I think of responsibility, I think of the biggest teaching that we're given is that we're life givers. And everything from being a life giver flows into how we conduct ourselves in this world. And the responsibilities that we're given to protect life and to always be mindful that life-giving elements continue, and that's a responsibility versus a right which somebody has decided for you for which then something outside of you has to uphold what that right is, right? So if you think about the law, right, there's some outside entity that's determined what the law will be, and then it's up to society to uphold that law, and then there's an outside authority to enforce it, and it never is really truly yours inherently, and that's a difference. So when I think about the life-giving source, the energy, the creation energy that comes from women, that is a very, very different place, and it's something that you then have to protect. It's your own inherent authority. And so those are really very different spaces and different perspectives. So rather than being created from a man and then being given a right, you're born into this world as a life giver, and it's your duty to ensure that that flow of life continues well beyond us.
I might just add a little bit to that. I always learn with these women, so I sort of open my ears very wide and understand deeper. And I think that difference, the rights as we United States women understand, as Michelle was saying, can be taken away from us and are currently. And so it's an unstable system when it's rights, but responsibilities, rights are what we ask for. Rights are what come from, all the way back to Eve and the creation story, and women creating evil and bringing evil into the world. And as a result, God's punishment in Genesis is that we will be under the authority of our husbands and give birth in pain and sorrow. And that canon law, that the woman comes under the authority of man, so the two become one, and the one is the man in marriage, that extends into common law, where we, under the Blackstone Code and the origins of this country, adopting the founding fathers, despite Abigail Adams saying, look, don't do this, guys. Don't adopt the Blackstone Code, which had just been codified in England. And it said, when a woman marries, she is dead in the law. She ceases to exist legally. And so they did. They went ahead and adopted that. And so we come from that position, not of creators of anything but evil in our tradition. And so rights then carry with them all that baggage of uncertainty, of instability, of privilege. We've given you the right to vote. We've given you these rights as though it's a gift that we're given as we move forward. But the sustainability of responsibilities, the sustainability of when you have a balance, you don't need rights. It doesn't even, the language doesn't even work. It's really in ways, this is the responsibility. So our rights, used in that context, have a very different meaning.
I just want to say that's why I put that in there, because that's where that all comes from, certified from creation.
So I guess I want to share with you something that maybe you're not aware of, I don't know, but I want to then turn it back to the panel here. So you may or not be aware, but the Haudenosaunee people are the last remaining Aboriginal governmental form that pre-existed the United States, pre-existed the colonial process. There aren't any others. And in certain areas of the Confederacy on their territories is the last remaining sachamship titles, clan mother titles, And that process is still going on, right? It's the last one. Everyone else, in some form or another, has adopted a Western electoral system. And until somebody tells me differently, I'm going to keep saying it. I've been saying it for over 10 years, and no one's been able to share that that's not true. Why is that?
Because we're strong-headed. You know, the interesting thing that I wanted to add to the first question was that we live in a society that's a paternal order, where you take on your father's last name or your husband's last name, so we're a property of. But in the Haudenosaunee world, you take your mother's clan. The status of who you are rests in, and your political voice rests in who your mother is, not your father, and that's understood, and there's no argument about that. And so what becomes really important is that matrifocal power that rests in a cooperative society that works together. I love what Matilda Jocelyn Gage said. Never was civilization
Never was justice
more perfect
Yeah.
and civilization higher. Basically, the suffering women seen for themselves a society that could not be better, you know, and so, and they wanted that because they never seen that before. That's all.
So why is that? That's the question, huh? That's a good question. Well, you know, I don't know if I have the answer to it, but I have a little story though that, you know, you never realize sometimes growing up what you have, right? You go out into the world and you discover and explore, and, you know, we as Haudenosaunee people, we're not perfect. Although you talk to some of us. But yeah, so growing up, I mean, when I say that we're not perfect, meaning that, you know, we have conflict, you know, we have, you know, the same challenges as all human beings do, and through times in our history, whether it was a message that was given to our people and how we organized ourselves and how we governed ourselves, really brought this really beautiful system that you all participate in today. And I think that there's something really powerful in that. And so there's so much that's being said tonight about what story is told and who's telling the story. And it's so interesting that the founding fathers of the United States were so moved and influenced by our people that they modeled the U.S. Constitution after our system. And why is that story not told? Why? So for our young ones who are here in the audience, this might be the first time you've heard something like that, right? And for some of you, not so young, right? And we're in our, you know, beautiful years here of living on this planet. I don't know, maybe this might be the first time you've heard that too, I'm not sure. But it's not common knowledge, and that's a problem, right? So you ask, why is it that we still exist with this traditional government, right? And, well, you're participating in it today, but there's pieces of it and that history that have been omitted deliberately. And I also do believe that there are historians and academics who are directly responsible for omitting that history and have to take responsibility for it. And so you'll begin to understand more clearly why we still exist in the way that we do when that history is told. Because then the pieces that have been omitted become clearer, right? Because within our governing structure, it's our clan mothers, like Mama Bear, and all of the women, all of her sister clan mothers, who really are the ones that really have the ultimate say within our governance. But that didn't get translated over into US governance. Right? So there's pieces that have been missing. Every time we meet and we have a meeting, we get together and we start with an opening address. And we give thanks for all elements of life, from the people, to the earth, to the waters, to everything living, all the way up to the sky and the stars. And thanking all of creation, and we bring all of our minds together as one before we start any meeting. And that's what the Founding Fathers saw, and we're very influenced by that. And in that is also understandings of compassion and love and forgiveness. So imagine if we as human beings, or human beings even in this country, every time we came together for a meeting just like this one, we all started out with acknowledging each other's existence and presence, and the presence of the waters that flow outside. And we talked about bringing our minds together as one, and that may we meet in a good mind with love and compassion. And I think right now in today's world, what we're experiencing is a huge lack of love and compassion and understanding and forgiveness. And we're all worried about our rights. Nobody's thinking about their responsibilities. What's your responsibility to the water? What's your responsibility to the trees and the air and the future generations, right? So when you start to think that way and you find that you're in relationship to the world, it makes a huge difference. So that's why I think we have this longevity, because we're also looking to generations far ahead of us who were never going to be on this planet together in human form. Right? So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Sounds good.